I watched him sign divorce papers Monday, his frozen sperm vials humming. After I said I'd think about kids for 10 years, I had no idea this would shatter everything. I still remember the exact moment the ink dried on the legal document, the way the pen left a thin, unforgiving line across the page, and the hollow click of the stapler as the clerk sealed my marriage's fate. My heart thudded like a drum in a war zone, and for a split second I wondered if the universe was playing a cruel joke on me. How could a casual, half-hearted promise about future children ignite a chain reaction that ended in a courtroom, a frozen bank of sperm, and a divorce filing that arrived on my phone before sunrise? The story, however, didn't start with a courtroom. It began 3 years earlier, in a cramped loft apartment overlooking a city that never seemed to sleep, where my boyfriend, then husband Matt, and I spent our evenings scrolling through Instagram feeds that were saturated with perfect baby pictures, tiny shoes, and glowing parents who seemed to have cracked the secret to a flawless life. We were both 30-something professionals, thriving in our careers, and the idea of settling down felt like a distant, almost mythical concept. Yet the pressure was there, humming in the background like the low-frequency buzz of a refrigerator. One night, after a particularly long week at the agency where I worked as a creative director, we collapsed onto our couch, wine glasses half filled, and started talking about the future. I was honest, maybe too honest. "Matt, I love you," I said, "but I'm not ready to have kids. Not now. Maybe in 10 years if I ever feel like it." I laughed, trying to make it sound light, as if I were tossing a feather into the wind. "I'll think about it," I added, because the word think felt safe. It didn't commit me to anything concrete. Matt smiled, his eyes softening. "That's fine," he replied. "We have plenty of time. I'll just keep my options open." He didn't elaborate, but the subtext was clear. He was already planning, already preparing for a future where children would be part of the equation. I didn't ask how, and I didn't think it mattered. I was convinced that love was enough to keep the gears turning, that we could navigate any timeline we chose. What I didn't realize was that my offhand comment was a seed that would sprout into a towering oak of expectations, and that Matt, in his quiet, unassuming way, had already started building the roots. He began researching fertility clinics, reading articles about sperm banking, and casually mentioning future plans during our dinner conversations. I brushed it off as harmless curiosity, but each mention was a tiny nail driving into a coffin I didn't know I was constructing. The first red flag in hindsight was the way Matt started bringing up insurance for our future. "You know, it's smart to have a backup," he said, scrolling through a glossy magazine that featured a smiling couple holding a baby while a caption read, "Secure your future, one freeze at a time." I laughed. "I'm not even thinking about kids yet, Matt." He smiled, but his eyes flickered with something I couldn't read, perhaps a mixture of hope and impatience. A week later, I posted a photo on Facebook of us at a rooftop bar, the city lights sparkling behind us. The caption read, "Living our best lives, no kids in sight yet." My friends flooded the post with emojis, comments, and memes about when you're ready and enjoying the freedom. One of my closest friends, Jenna, messaged me privately, "Girl, you're killing me. When are we going to see the little you'll have someday? I'm already planning the baby shower." I replied with a laughing emoji, not realizing that my own words were feeding a narrative that would soon spiral out of control. Matt, meanwhile, was quietly taking steps that would later become the fulcrum of our downfall. He booked an appointment at a reputable fertility clinic, not for a checkup, but for a sperm freezing session. He told me it was just in case, a precaution for any future scenario. "It's like an insurance policy," he said, handing me a pamphlet with the clinic's logo. I nodded, thinking it was a harmless gesture, a sign of his responsibility, and I didn't question it. In my mind, the idea of freezing sperm seemed far removed from our present reality, something for people who were already planning families. When the day of the procedure arrived, I was at work, buried under a deadline for a major campaign launch. I got a text from Matt, all set. "The clinic is amazing, and the doctor said everything looks good." I replied with a quick great, and went back to my screen, unaware that the tiny glass vial being sealed in a sterile lab would become the physical embodiment of my careless promise. Months turned into a year, and the frozen vials sat in a climate-controlled freezer, a silent promise that I had never intended to keep. I was busy, traveling for work, attending industry events, and living a life that felt both exhilarating and empty. My friends started having babies, and their Instagram feeds were now filled with pastel nurseries, tiny socks, and the occasional first steps video. I felt a pang of jealousy, but I also felt a strange detachment. I told myself I'm still thinking about it. The phrase became a mantra, a way to keep the pressure at bay while still appearing considerate. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday in March. I was scrolling through my Instagram stories when I saw a post from my cousin Maya, who had just announced her pregnancy. The caption read, "Counting down the days until we meet our little miracle." The comment section erupted with love and excitement. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I typed a quick congratulations, then stared at the screen, realizing that my own maybe later was now a stark contrast to the reality unfolding around me. That night I called Matt. "Do you ever think about, actually having kids?" I asked, trying to sound casual. There was a pause on the other end, a breath that seemed to carry the weight of months of unspoken expectations. "I've been thinking about it a lot," he said, his voice low. "I even have a backup plan." He mentioned the frozen sperm, and I felt my heart drop. "You actually did that?" I asked, the words spilling out in a mixture of shock and disbelief. He laughed, a short, nervous chuckle. "I wanted to be prepared. I thought you'd change your mind eventually. I didn't want to waste time when we finally decide." I could hear the frustration in his tone, a frustration that had been building for months, hidden behind his calm exterior. I tried to reassure him, "I'm still not ready, Matt. I'm still thinking about it." He sighed, "I know, but I'm scared you'll never change your mind." In that moment, I realized that my vague promise had become a ticking time bomb. I had given him a lifeline he could cling to, while I remained suspended in indecision. The irony was brutal. I had been the one who said I'll think about it, yet I was the one who was truly thinking about the consequences, about the way my words were being weaponized, about the fact that I had allowed my partner to make a life-changing decision based on a promise that was never meant to be a contract. The next day, I posted a story on Instagram, a picture of a coffee cup with the caption, "Thinking about the future." The comment section filled with emojis and jokes, but one comment stood out: "When are you actually going to think about doing something?" It was my friend Lily, blunt as ever. I felt exposed, as if the universe had turned my private indecision into a public spectacle. Matt's reaction to my post was immediate. He sent me a message that read, "I'm filing for divorce on Monday. I can't wait 10 more years while you keep saying maybe. I've already taken steps to secure my future, and I'm done waiting." I stared at the screen, feeling the world tilt. The words were like a punch to the gut, a sudden, devastating blow that left me breathless. I spent the next 48 hours in a haze of disbelief, scrolling through my phone, reading the divorce filing, watching the lab's website that confirmed the existence of my frozen sperm vials, and replaying every conversation where Matt had hinted at his plans. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. My casual, non-committal language had been interpreted as a green light for Matt to take irreversible action. I had given him permission unintentionally to set in motion a series of events that would now forever alter both of our lives. The first wave of emotional whiplash was denial. "He can't be serious," I told myself. "He's just angry, he'll come around." I called my sister, hoping for reassurance. She listened, then said, "Britt, you said think about it." He heard "think about it, and I'll start planning." "You gave him a roadmap. You need to own that." Her words were a cold splash of reality. I had been the architect of my own downfall, and the bricks were my own careless phrasing. The second wave was anger directed at myself, at Matt, at the societal pressure that made us feel obligated to have children, at the social media feeds that constantly reminded us of what we were missing. I scrolled through my friends' posts, each one a reminder of the milestones I had been avoiding. I felt a surge of resentment toward the world that had turned my personal indecision into a public performance. The third wave was grief. I mourned the relationship that had once been full of laughter, late-night brainstorming sessions, and shared dreams. I mourned the version of myself that had believed love alone could hold everything together. I mourned the future I had imagined, a future where we might have children, or might not, now reduced to a legal document and a set of frozen cells that would never be used. In the days that followed, I tried to piece together the timeline, to understand how a single phrase could cascade into such a catastrophic outcome. I remembered the moment Matt first mentioned sperm banking. He said, "It's just a precaution." I thought, sure, why not? I didn't ask about the cost, the process, or the emotional implications. I didn't ask how he felt about the possibility of using those cells without my consent. I never imagined that the phrase "I'll think about it" could be taken as an invitation to act unilaterally. I also realized the role of social validation in this tragedy. My friends' comments, the likes on my Instagram posts, the subtle pressure to present a picture-perfect life, all of these fed into a narrative where I felt compelled to keep the option of children open, even if I wasn't ready. The maybe later became a social performance, a way to appease the expectations of my network without confronting my own fears. I was living for the approval of an audience that never asked me what I truly wanted. When the divorce was finalized, Matt's attorney sent me a copy of the settlement agreement, which included a clause about the frozen sperm. The vials will be stored for 10 years, after which they may be discarded, the document read. I felt a strange mix of relief and horror. The vials were a symbol of my indecision, now officially labeled as discarded if we never decided to use them. It was as if the universe was giving me a chance to close the chapter, to erase the physical evidence of my careless promise. I called the clinic the next day. "I want the vials destroyed," I told the receptionist, my voice trembling. She asked, "Are you sure? Once they're destroyed, there's no way to retrieve them." I hesitated, thinking of the countless times I had said maybe, the endless loop of indecision. Then I said, "Yes, I'm sure." The receptionist noted my request, and I felt a small, unexpected sense of empowerment. I had finally taken control of a situation that had spiraled out of my hands. The act of destroying the vials was both literal and symbolic. I watched a technician place the glass containers into a high-temperature incinerator, the flames licking the metal, turning what could have been a future family into ash. The heat was intense, and I felt a strange warmth in my chest, as if a part of my past self was being burned away. In that moment, I realized that the real damage wasn't the loss of potential children, it was the loss of trust, the erosion of communication, and the way I had allowed a vague promise to become a weapon. After the incineration, I turned to social media once more, this time to share a different kind of story. I posted a photo of a blank notebook with the caption, "I've finally closed a chapter I never meant to open." The comments were a mixture of support and curiosity. Some asked if I regretted my decision, others praised my strength. I wrote a long caption, explaining how my offhand remark had led to a cascade of consequences, how I'd learned the power of words, and how I'd reclaimed agency over my own life. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from strangers who admitted they'd made similar maybe promises that had led to unintended outcomes. A woman from Seattle wrote, "I told my boyfriend I'd think about moving to the suburbs, and he bought a house without me. It took years to untangle that mess." Another, a man from Austin, confessed, "I froze my eggs because my girlfriend said maybe someday." She never wanted kids, and now we're divorced. The collective realization was clear: our society often treats maybe as a placeholder, not a firm commitment, and that ambiguity can be weaponized, intentionally or not. Through this digital dialogue, I discovered a community of people who had been blindsided by the same kind of careless optimism. We exchanged stories, offered advice, and most importantly, validated each other's feelings. The sense of isolation that had plagued me during the divorce dissolved, replaced by a shared understanding that words carry weight, especially when they intersect with life-changing decisions. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild my life on a foundation of clarity. I started therapy, where I unpacked the underlying fear that had driven me to use maybe as a shield. I realized that my reluctance to discuss children stemmed not from a lack of desire, but from a fear of losing control over my own timeline. I had been terrified that committing to a plan would lock me into a path I couldn't escape, so I defaulted to indefinite postponement. Therapy also helped me understand my own relationship with social validation. I had been curating an image of a free-spirited, career-focused woman who didn't need a family to feel complete. That image was, in part, a reaction to the constant stream of baby announcements on social media. I learned to set boundaries, to turn off the endless scroll, and to focus on my own values rather than the expectations of an online audience. I reconnected with friends in person, away from the filtered lenses of Instagram. We met for coffee, for hikes, for board game nights, and we truly talked about our hopes, our fears, and the words we used to navigate those conversations. I found that when people speak plainly, without the safety net of maybe, they create space for honest negotiation. I started saying, I'm not ready for kids right now, and I need at least 5 years to feel comfortable with that decision, instead of the vague I'll think about it. The specificity felt empowering, and it also set clear expectations for anyone I was dating. When I eventually started seeing someone new, a fellow graphic designer named Alex, I made sure to address the topic early. Over dinner, after a few glasses of wine, I said, I want to be upfront. I'm not looking to have children in the next few years. If that changes, I'll let you know, but for now, I need to focus on my career and personal growth. Alex nodded, his expression thoughtful. I appreciate the honesty, he said. I'm not in a rush either. Let's see where life takes us. The conversation was brief, but it felt like a breath of fresh air. No hidden expectations, no silent agreements. Just a clear, mutual understanding. Looking back, I see the arc of my journey as a series of reversals. At first, I was the confident, in control narrator, using maybe as a shield. Then, as the consequences unfolded, I became the victim of my own ambiguity, watching my marriage dissolve because I hadn't set firm boundaries. Finally, I reclaimed agency by confronting my own flawed reasoning, destroying the physical evidence of my mistake, and learning to communicate with precision. The justice I felt was not a cosmic retribution, but a personal reckoning. Matt's decision to freeze his sperm, file for divorce, and move on was a direct result of my careless promise. He had taken control, asserting his own boundaries after feeling ignored. In a twisted way, his actions forced me to confront the reality I had been avoiding. The karma was proportional. My vague maybe led to a concrete, irreversible outcome. The emotional whiplash I experienced, shock, denial, anger, grief, empowerment, mirrored the roller coaster many of us ride when navigating relationships in a world saturated with digital validation and societal expectations. Each swing forced me to examine a different facet of my identity: the professional woman, the partner, the friend, the social media user, the individual with her own timeline. Now, months after the vials have turned to ash, I sit at my desk, drafting a new campaign for a client who wants to market a line of future-proof products. The brief reads, create a narrative that speaks to the modern consumer who wants to be prepared for any eventuality. I smile, because I know exactly what that means. I think about the phrase future-proof and realize it's a double-edged sword. Preparing for the future is wise, but it becomes dangerous when preparation replaces conversation, when a frozen vial replaces a heartfelt dialogue. I've learned that true preparedness isn't about storing cells in a freezer or drafting legal clauses. It's about having transparent conversations, setting clear expectations, and respecting each other's timelines. It's about recognizing that the words we throw into the ether maybe, later, someday can become anchors that pull us into unintended seas. If there's one piece of advice I can give anyone reading this, it's simple. When you're tempted to say, I'll think about it, pause. Ask yourself, am I truly undecided, or am I avoiding a decision? If you're leaning toward avoidance, be honest. Say, I'm not ready to decide right now, but I'll let you know when I have a clearer picture. If you're truly undecided, give yourself a concrete timeframe: 6 months, a year rather than an indefinite horizon. That way, you protect both yourself and the people who care about you from the fallout of ambiguous promises. The story of my frozen sperm and my divorce is a cautionary tale, but it's also a story of growth. It revealed how easily we can let casual language become a catalyst for life-altering actions, how social media can amplify our insecurities, and how the justice we seek often comes from within. It taught me that the most powerful transformation happens when we turn our own mistakes into lessons, when we destroy the symbols of our errors, and when we rebuild with intention. I'm still single, still career-focused, and still navigating the question of children. But now, when I think about it, I do so with clarity, not with a vague promise that could be misinterpreted. I've learned to own my words, to set boundaries, and to communicate with the honesty that my younger self lacked. And if anyone ever asks me whether I've thought about kids, I'll answer, yes, I've thought about it. And I've decided that if I ever want children, it will be on my terms, with clear communication, not a frozen vial and a divorce filing. In the end, the most shocking revelation wasn't that Matt froze his sperm or that he filed for divorce on a Monday. It was that my own words, spoken without thought, held the power to destroy a marriage. The lesson is simple, yet profound. Words are not just sounds, they are actions. And sometimes, the most devastating actions begin with a single, careless phrase.